and no chance, and the woman knew all along what she was up against. Had they lived their lives separate from one another, they might have become more or less ordinary people. Not that they would have been unimportant, but alone and apart, each might have gone unnoticed and unremembered in the larger flow of African life. Together, however, their impact was considerable. My own role in their story is minimal. I'm an aging, if not yet ancient, reporter, and should have known better. But even though I made an honest effort to keep a journalist's discreet distance, to remain emotionally uninvolved in what was seen and heard, I was powerfully drawn to this child and this woman, as much as I have been drawn to Africa itself. Almost before I understood what was happening, we became friends. So, with some reluctance and not much practice, I have inserted myself into certain aspects of their story, only to provide background and context, and also, I suppose, to reinforce its pull, even on someone quite determined to remain detached. It was my intention when I began writing their story to maintain a steady and straightforward narrative. Eventually, however, I found that a few small circles and digressions were unavoidable. Perhaps there are too many, but it is difficult, if not impossible, to grasp a story like this one, a story that, as will become clear, carries so much historical, emotional, and political weight, without also coming to grips with the historical, emotional, political terrain on which it occurred. I also realize that, like most really good stories, this one is bound to be diminished simply by the telling. My reporting cannot reconstruct the reality, nor can my writing capture the richness and power of their lives. Still, it's my belief that anyone who has the good fortune to cross paths with people as exceptional as this child and this woman is obligated to pass along their story, no matter how flawed the medium or faulty the method. It is with that sense of inherent imperfection that I have tried to do just that. I am simply passing it along in these pages, in the sure and certain knowledge that it is really quite beyond me. Prologue. On my way into the house from the car, I heard a child's voice from the other side of a thick hedge running along the driveway. I thought this was probably the kid, and although it's never been my habit to eavesdrop, I had, after all, traveled several thousand miles, all the way to the bottom of Africa, specifically to see him, to broadcast his story on an American television network. So it was no great ethical stretch for me to rationalize a small moment of eavesdropping. It seemed not so much an invasion of his privacy as an innocent opportunity to size him up before we sat down together later that afternoon for an on-camera interview. I peeked through the bushes and saw a little boy pacing back and forth in a scruffy garden beside the shabby house. "We are all the same," he was saying. He paused and repeated the phrase. "We are all the same." I was sure he couldn't see me, and he was certain he was alone, talking only to himself. "We are not different from one another," he continued. Once again he paused, apparently stumped. He glanced down at the paper in his hand, then looked up and out into the distance before adding a few forgotten words to those he had remembered. "We are all the same. We are not different from one another. We all belong to one family." He nodded, pleased with himself. His thin voice perfectly matched his frail physique, and the clothing he wore seemed to diminish him even further. A bulky sweater, much too large, cargo pants dragging the ground around his sneakers, and a baseball cap settled down around his ears, its Chicago Bulls logo nearly the size of his face. A stiff breeze would have blown him away, and I thought he could not possibly have been 11 years old, the age listed for him in the sheaf of research I'd read on the plane. He looked no more than 6 or 7, and yet there he was rehearsing a speech I'd been told he would soon be making to an in-person audience of several thousand people, as well as to millions watching on satellite television. Of course, it was possible that he was not the right kid, not the one I'd come to Johannesburg to see. Either that, or he was a midget. I made a mental note to check and confirm his age. "We are all the same," he was saying again. "We are not different from one another. We all belong to one family." As I would learn, these were not idle words for him, nor merely rhetorical themes for his speech. His constant mantra was equality, his passionate gospel family, a concept with which he was thoroughly familiar, since he had several of them. There was the one into which he had been born, but from which he had been separated and to some degree alienated for several years. There was another within which he lived his day-to-day life. And of course there was the family in which his membership was entirely involuntary, but which he had embraced nevertheless. We are all the same. We are not different from one another. We all belong to one family. Between each phrase and the next, he paused and grinned, his white teeth sparkling against the dark skin of his face. And I realized he was playing to several cameras he pretended were in the garden, shamelessly hamming it up, conjuring for the purposes of his rehearsal the real ones he'd been told would be rolling when he actually took the stage. We are all the same. Smile. We are not different from one another. Smile. We all belong to one family. Smile. In America, this kid could run for Congress. I liked him anyway, or at any rate I found myself immediately impressed with his patience and his determination. He seemed more than willing to practice his lines until he had mastered them, no matter how much time that might require. There was also about him a certain guileless charm. Even in those first few moments I was captivated by his unassuming innocence. The space usually maintained between me and the people in my stories was rapidly shrinking, and I knew I was granting myself an indulgence for the worst possible reason. Because the kid was cute. We are all the same. We are not different from one another. We all belong to one family. It suddenly struck me that his words were ringing a distant bell. We are all the same, like some old song long hidden away. We are not different from one another. On some dark ledge of my brain, we all belong to one family. Until at last it came to me. We love and we laugh. We hurt and we cry. We live and we die. Yes, of course. In his soft sing-song soprano, he was reciting an adaptation. His adaptation, as it turned out, of Shakespeare's best lines in The Merchant of Venice, those memorable words spoken by Shylock in behalf of his maligned and marginalized tribe. I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? The kid was speaking not for the Jews, of course, but rather for that exponentially expanding family he had not asked to join, but of which he was nevertheless a part. The millions of Africans who carried a deadly virus in their bodies, an infection that had not only doomed them, but damned them as well, had made of them social pariahs, punished by their countries and cultures and communities simply because they were ill, stigmatized as the new lepers of the new millennium. The kid was speaking for them. We are all the same. And for himself. We are all the same. And in a way, for all the maligned and marginalized of the earth. We are not different from one another. We all belong to one family. We love and we laugh. We hurt and we cry. We live and we die. He seemed not quite pleased with his recitation of the last line.